So, hi to you, and thank you for joining us today, and for those listening online. We're in a new series that we started, I think, last week called A Committed People. We were in the Sermon on the Mount for something like 6 months, guys. And this one won't be 6 months, okay? So it'll be just a few weeks. And we're talking about the power of and the purpose of making and keeping commitments in our lives. Yeah, it's so important. So this is going to be a very different sermon to my usual sermons. Maybe slightly a bit longer. I'll try my best. But we're also talking about the fact that in our day and in this day and age, there's a lot of suspicion around that word called commitment. A lot of suspicion. People are becoming more and more kind of commitment avoidant, more commitment phobic. Nowhere, I think, is this more prevalent and apparent than in the area of relationships. Okay? Last week was the introduction to this new series, and this week we're talking about relationships and commitment. What does that look like for you and I? Some of you know this week we had a day where we in our culture kind of celebrate love and relationships and romance. Do you know what day I'm referring to? Anybody? Pancake Day. Come on, it was Valentine's Day, right? And so I read this week that psychologists actually say that there are two kinds of people, right? People who love Valentine's Day and people who are sick of people who love Valentine's Day. Wherever you are on that spectrum, you're very welcome here, right? But the reality is that there are a lot of different stories here today. Okay, a lot of different stories, a lot of different things going on in our lives, a lot of relationships. Some might be in some difficulty and some might be flourishing. But we've all got various stories, okay? And I know from my own journey, ups and downs of relationships, but I'll never forget the day I got married to that young lady right there. 21st of September, 2002. Hey?
Who's the guy on the left?
The guy with hair you're talking about. And you can imagine just how excited I was when I saw her walking down the aisle, and when she put that ring on my finger and then she said those amazing words, "I'll have you, fella." No, for better or for worse, I'll take you. I'll take you. You know, there are a few words that are more powerful, more profound, more meaningful, even more, I think, anxiety-producing than those words, "I take you." These guys are going to say those very words soon. But I remember as my wedding day approached, and amidst the excitement and the wedding plans and the anticipation, I became profoundly aware, not just aware of the woman that I was going to marry and commit my life to, but I was very aware of those words, "I take you, for better or for worse." I was very aware about that commitment that I was going to make to that young woman right there. And you know, I loved her. I wanted to marry her, but I'd never made a promise like that ever before. It got me thinking about sort of all the what ifs in our lives. Does anybody else ever wrestle with a kind of the what ifs in life? You know, people think, well, what if I change? Or what if she changes? What if our feelings change? What if we have too many disagreements? What if she thinks the toilet paper is supposed to go this way, like this, when the Bible clearly says that it goes this way, right? What will we do in those moments in our relationship? What will we do? How will commitment survive when we have those challenges? I take you for better or for worse. It kind of got me thinking, like, why do human beings do this? Why do we do this? Interestingly enough, more and more people today say maybe we shouldn't. Okay? More and more people are saying human beings aren't biologically suited for this kind of commitment. I mean, very few animals in the animal kingdom make this kind of life partnership commitment, emotionally, people change. They feel things differently over time. People move on. They change what they want, or they want different things out of life. Life is just unpredictable. Unpredictable. What happens when circumstances change? What happens when our situation changes, or experiences of life kind of change our hearts? What happens then? Which is why more and more people are saying, I think it might be best, it might be safest to kind of just avoid commitment, to put it off, to not keep it. People will move in together, but they'll put off marriage. People will hook up. They will not date. They will not take relationships that seriously. People are looking for a no strings attached, or a friends with benefits, or a Netflix and chill, which I just recently discovered has nothing to do with watching TV. So be careful with that one, please. It's interesting. Technology makes this just all the more convenient for us. You know, when I was at school, if you wanted to ask someone out, you actually had to pick up a phone, which oddly enough was attached to the wall. Do you remember those days? And you had to pick up the phone and call somebody. You had to call them. You had to speak words to them and ask them out. You know, it took guts, it took courage, it took emotional intelligence, which is why I never did it. Okay? But that's what people would do. Today, you can just get on your phone, okay? And there's an app there on your phone, and it helps you meet up, hook up, shack up, break up, all with the touch of a button. It's that easy. But here's the thing. Technology is not our problem. Our way of thinking about commitment and relationships is our problem. Living in a culture where it seems like the most prevalent concept is that the best way to enjoy life or freedom or autonomy or sex is to avoid the constraints or the limitations of commitment. There's real data we can see that kind of supports this. Just to give you some numbers, thanks to Lucy for researching this for me this week. But you can see the marriage rate in the United Kingdom over the last 30 years just declining. Okay? We're learning more and more. You can see there. And by the way, that last drop there is pandemic levels, really. It's pretty scary. But we're learning more and more about people's perspective on marriage. And a survey from 2010 showed that almost half of young adults between the ages of 18 and 29 in our country think marriage has become obsolete. It's just obsolete at this point. We're replacing for better or for worse with I'll take you at least until I don't want you anymore. It's interesting, on average, that Lucy had it up there, 270,000 weddings on average in the UK every year. Statistics would say that about 40% don't make it past the 15-year mark. That was, when I saw Lucy's data, it really shocked me. That doesn't include the number of couples who stay married, but those who kind of, those whose commitment kind of runs cold or grows distant or grows stale. It doesn't include those. Here's the thing. This is far more than just data. This is about people. Okay? This is about you. This is about me. This is about our hearts. This is about our lives. And this is why what we feel really matters most. But I know that there are a lot of different stories and circumstances right here in this room. People who are listening online. Some of you are single. Some of you are married. Some of you are single but want to be married. Some of you are in a relationship. Some of you might be just out of a relationship. Some people might be in kind of a friends with benefits thing. Some of you are friends without benefits, which sounds worse, but it's actually a lot healthier. Okay? Some of you have lost someone that you love. And there's a lot to cover, a lot to think about. But here's what's true for all of us. Okay? It's real, it's personal, it's vulnerable, isn't it? And the truth is, part of the vulnerability is just that yours and my relational past is so far from perfect. I stand with you in the mess of it, in the hurt of it. There are decisions I would make differently today. There are people I would treat differently, which is why we need to come back and talk about that word commitment and what it really means. And it's not just about whether or not you or I have the strength to commit. I think sometimes we hear that word and we think, okay, this is going to be one of those talks. Do I have the courage? Do I have what it takes? Do I have the righteousness? It's actually something different. There are different questions we need to wrestle with. We need to wrestle with why commitment actually matters, and then what commitment looks like in the different seasons of life or the different stages of life, and then lastly, how to keep our commitments. How do we actually do that? And so for the rest of the time, as quickly as I can, I want to walk through kind of these three questions, right? The why, the what, and the how when it comes to commitment or committed relationships, starting with the why. Why? Why should people commit to one another? Isn't it just kind of old-fashioned? Aren't people too predictable? Isn't it safer to just avoid commitment completely? Isn't it safer to avoid getting hurt? I actually read a study about why more and more teenagers are having sexual encounters without any relational involvement. One of the reasons was, and I'm not making this up, they said being with a real person was difficult and even annoying. Have you ever met anyone who's not annoying at some point in time, somewhere, right? Is this really what it boils down to? Are commitment relationships just too risky or burdensome or difficult? Is it possible that we're just going to get hurt? The answer is yes, of course. That possibility does exist. Here's what's missing in this conversation about the risk of commitment. What's missing is that there's a much greater risk out there, and the risk is the risk of avoiding commitment. It's the risk of avoiding commitment. Over the long haul, over the long term, the risk of avoiding committed relationships is far greater. It's far greater. There's a research project called the Grant Study. Maybe you've heard of it. It's the longest running study on human development in history. Okay? It started in 1938 at Harvard University. 268 individuals were studied over 75 years, from their teens right up to their 80s or 90s. And the goal was very simple. They wanted to find out as objectively as they could what produces lasting happiness. Which parts of life will actually produce lasting joy and contentment? Wouldn't that be great to know? Yes. They followed these individuals literally for 75 years. They followed their health patterns. They looked at their medical records. They did brain scans on them. They interviewed their spouses and their families. There are literally tens of thousands of pages of data in this study. Here's what they found. They found happiness did not increase with greater wealth or more success or higher achievement. Guys, we who live in one of the wealthiest places in the world, we just need to pause and let that soak in for a moment. Yeah. There are real lives that were studied here with real data. This was not done by a church or by a pastor. This is not a Christian study at all. What they found happiness in no way correlated with greater wealth or more success or higher achievement. They also found happiness had nothing to do with fame or reputation or even social impact, even the amount of difference a person can make in the world. What they found was happiness correlated to one consistent factor over and over and over through a lifetime. And you know what it is? Lasting relationships. Lasting relationships. Dr. George Valiant, who led the study for over 30 years, said that their research proved that there are two pillars of happiness. This is the world, by the way, making these observations. And these are his words. One is love, and the other is finding a way of coping with life that does not push love away. In other words, happiness is found in committed relationships and in love and living in such a way that doesn't run, doesn't hide, doesn't, sort of break, but keeps close, committed relationships. Which, by the way, should be no surprise to us, because the scripture has been teaching this for thousands of years. Okay? When God created human beings, he said these words: "It is not good for a man to be alone." Which is strange if you think about that statement in a world without sin. Okay? I mean, think about it. The markets were up, the rent was down, everything was just as it should be in the world, except for one thing. Adam lacked a relationship, and not just a casual friendship or friends with benefits. He lacked a committed relationship, someone who was committed to him and someone he was committed to. And the text goes on to frame it this way. It says, "This is why a man leaves his father and his mother and is united to his wife, and they become one flesh." This is the language of commitment. The goal is commitment. Some of you will know the old King James version of this text, where it talks about leaving and cleaving. The man leaves his father and mother and cleaves to his wife. You've heard that language before. That cleaving portrays the context of a risky stepping out and making a commitment. In that day, a home was not just where you lived until you went to uni. Home was a place for education, economic stability, learning a trade, things like that. And so to leave one's father's house and a mother was to put one's life and livelihood at risk, all for the sake of commitment. Really? You see, from the very beginning, God designed you and I. Guys, listen to this. From the very beginning, God designed you and I for and to live in the context of committed relationships. It's something that was supposed to be so good for us and so right for us. But I know, for so many, it feels like it's gone wrong. Our world is filled with such incredible brokenness and pain. We'll come back to that and what to think about that. But the why of commitment, here it is. Because it's a good thing and we are made for it, which leads us to the what question, right? Number 2, what kind of commitments are we talking about? What kind of commitments are we really talking about? Is this really just about marriage? Is this one of those talks where we're just going to say, well, if you're married, then that's great. And if you're not, better luck next time? Is there any part of this that applies to life beyond that? The answer is absolutely yes, it does. It does. One of the weaknesses in a lot of churches, I feel, and it's not always intentional, but is speaking to single people as if they're somehow second-class citizens. I remember people saying to me for so much of my single life before I met Nikki, "John, you seem to be such a nice guy. How come you're single?" You ever hear those words? As if it were sort of a disease that I needed to get rid of, Here's the thing. The Bible doesn't speak about being single as a problem to be corrected, to be fixed. In fact, Christianity was the first major religion to uphold singleness as an honorable, faithful way to live. Here's the thing. Jesus was single. Did you know that? Paul the Apostle was single. He wrote about the gift and the blessing of being single. If we're going to talk about committed relationships, the first place we want to go to is, how did Jesus live out commitment in his life? How did he? Well, he did it in a very important way. It's kind of the first what of committed relationships. He did it through this thing of committed friendship. Okay? Committed friendship. Not having a large social network, not having 10,000 friends on Facebook, not making sure that he had the most likes on his Instagram account. Committed relationships or committed friendships. A lot of rabbis in those days would teach, they would lead, they would cast vision. Jesus focused on friendship. Have you ever noticed through his life, he had close friends, committed friends, 12 disciples. Yes, I think it was symbolic of the 12 tribes of Israel. But here's the thing, he needed just a few close friends, people he was committed to, people he would spend time with, people he was loyal to. He once told them directly, I don't call you servants, I call you friends. You're my mates, you're my friends. You know, I think about John, who called himself the disciple that Jesus loved. The disciple who knew deep friendship with this person of Jesus. And we see this loyalty playing out, just as I begin to bring this to a close, even in the most difficult moments when Judas comes to betray Jesus. He comes to Jesus and he brings soldiers to arrest him. Jesus says, do what you came to do. Do what you came for, friend. Do you hear that? He's speaking to Judas here. Do what you came for, friend. For a long time, I read this as sort of a kind of biting sarcasm, sort of an implicit, understated attack. But I don't think that's what it is. I think Jesus is expressing what is true for him. Okay? Is that Judas is still his friend. Even when Judas isn't loyal, Jesus is. Jesus understands the practice and the value of committed friendship, even when this man turns on him and gives him that kiss of betrayal. Do what you came to do. Do what you came for, friend. My friendship with you doesn't change. My loyalty to you doesn't change. My love for you doesn't change. We'll flag that, and we're going to come back to that. You know, I think about it in my own life. I cannot remember a day when I didn't long for a close, committed friend. Do you know that feeling? Longing for someone who knows me, who cares for me. According to a study on YouGov, a quarter of people, listen to this, a quarter of people living in the UK lack a close friend, a best friend. And around 15% say that they have no friends at all. Meaning they don't have someone in their life that they can call. They don't have someone to turn to in crisis or in pain or in tragedy. They've somehow got to deal with it on their own. That's not okay. Some of you experience and you feel the burden of that perhaps even now. The writer of Proverbs put it this way. These are really serious words. And he says, one who is unreliable, who has unreliable friends, soon comes to ruin, but there is a friend who sticks closer than a brother. Let me ask you, who is that friend in your life right now? Who is that person in your life? For some of you, that may be why you're here today. God is nudging you to say, you need to focus on relationships and friendships in your life. You cannot go through it alone. Who is that friend in your life? Equally important question, for whom are you that friend? To whom have you given permission to call you at any time, to ask for anything, to interrupt your busy life with a request, a need, something that you may need to make a sacrifice for? To tell you the truth, not just the truth that you want to hear. You know, sometimes I think we long for but lack friendship because we're so focused on other things, on a career perhaps, on getting ahead, perhaps it's reputation. Those things are okay, but they cannot replace our need for committed friendships. We see that in Jesus' life. That's one of the what's, one kind of commitment. There's some of you who are in a different season of life. Some of you who are single, but you're looking for somebody to commit to. So what kind of commitment is important there? Dating is kind of an odd thing. I've not dated a whole lot. Maybe you've done a lot more dating than I have. But there's a lot of confusion in the church about dating. I grew up with all the books. I remember in the States, there was this one family with a bunch of girls, and the parents came and gave me the book, I Kissed Dating Goodbye. You remember that book? There's another book called The 10 Commandments of Dating. Or there's another book that says, I Kissed the Books on Dating Goodbye. There's all that stuff out there. Almost all the messages you hear about dating are about the commitment to find the right person. You've got to find the right person. How to find the right person. There's actually a TV show right now where a man or a woman will actually date about 20 to 24 people at the same time under the guise of finding the right person. Does anybody know what show I'm talking about? Yeah? They don't want to say it. Come on. What's it called again? It's The Bachelor. Okay? Don't look at me like I'm the only person who came across this show, okay? Most people think a healthy relationship is just about finding the right person, as if it's our job, that our job is just to narrow it down off of the menu. But the truth is, a healthy relationship also involves two people who are committed to becoming the right person. Yeah. Commitment is less about who you find and more about who you are. And who you're willing to become, and who you're choosing to become. Someone recently sent an email saying, because people are waiting so long to get married, it's naive, even ridiculous to suggest a person should wait to have sex because people need that kind of intimacy now. And I know I got married when I was 26 years old, which is young, I think, these days. I understood the dilemma that they were writing about, but the first thing I want to say is, yes, I understand we all need intimacy. That's part of what we're talking about, but what kind of intimacy are you actually describing? The intimacy of knowing a person isn't committed to you? The intimacy of them saying, I take you at least until tomorrow? Is that what you need? Is that what it's all about? Here's the thing, even if you're not a Christian, even if you are here and you think, I'm not sure the Bible really gets this, I'm not sure the church is really caught up on the culture, I'm not sure this isn't just old-fashioned or obsolete kind of thinking. Let me tell you, secular studies today confirm people who sleep together or live together are actually less dedicated, both before and even after they marry, if they marry at all. In other words, that journey, that decision doesn't lead toward a healthier, committed relationship. It actually leads us away from that, which is why God designed sex and intimacy to be part of a life-united, committed relationship called marriage. Is this countercultural? You bet your bottom dollar. Yes, it is. Will it take hard work? Will it take honest conversations and a lot of trust in God? Yes, absolutely. But will it give you the best chance at a lifetime of connection and trust and intimacy? Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. Which raises a great question. What if you've fallen short? Hey? What if you've fallen short? What if you've messed this up? What if I'm in a relationship that's not healthy? Well, you're in the right place. You're in the right place. It may not feel that way. Churches can sometimes be kind of crass, sometimes judgmental, sometimes kind of pushing people away if they live differently, if their relationships don't kind of look a certain way. But I have to ask you, if that's been your experience, don't take your church experience, take Jesus' life into account. Think about how he treated people whose relationships were far from perfect, which, by the way, is everybody. There was grace. There was love. There was listening. Then there was a vision of a life, a better life, a better way of life. He would call people and he would empower them to live that better life. We were talking for months now, for 6 months, the kingdom of God coming from up there down to here, impacting the very lives and relationships that we have here. That's an invitation for a lot of you. Maybe some of you are feeling that sense of maybe there's something you want to change in your life around this. You cannot do it on your own, but Jesus can help. He can help. God calls people into this unique and beautiful and rich and challenging picture of what faithfulness is really like. It's two people saying to each other, Josh and Phil, remember, okay, I take you for better or for worse. I'm sure you're practicing vows at the moment. I take you for better or for worse. Your smelly socks and your bad habits and all. I take you. And not just that, not just on the wedding day. People spend a lot of money and a lot of time planning a wedding and often so little time and energy actually preparing for that marriage. I know it's messy. I know it's hard. I know some of you have been through broken marriages and betrayal, and these things are not always clean and simple and tidy as we want them to be. But in the process of keeping commitments, something deeper and greater is actually forged in our lives, guys. And it's this beautiful thing called trust. See, here's the thing. You cannot live without trust. You cannot live your life and trust no one. It feels safer. It may feel easier. Some of you have been burnt and you're now thinking, I'll just step back. I don't have to trust anybody anymore. I can just live this way. Then the next question is, how do I learn to trust? How do I build trust? That's where commitment is so important. There's a writer by the name of Lewis Smedes who has this amazing book called Learning to Live the Love We Promised. Okay? And he writes about it this way. He says it takes a personal commitment to create trust. A lot of people today think, well, to have trust, it would take someone making sure that I have a guarantee that it's going to work out. Making sure I know that there's never going to be any pain in this relationship. Making sure that I always get my way. No. It takes personal commitment to create trust. And not just a vow spoken a year or 10 years or a lifetime ago, but a commitment reborn every single day. That's what Nikki and I have. That's what so many couples that I know have. A commitment reborn every single day by our reliable presence, renewed by acts of care and kindness, resurrected by generous forgiving. Somebody said that marriage is the union of two forgivers. You might need to forgive a lot. Our commitment to someone in caring love is the only guarantee that we can give. The only basis for trust. That's why God created marriage. That's why God created committed friendship, so that we could love and be loved, so that we can trust and be trusted, so we can forgive and be forgiven. I hear this a lot. The perspective that commitment is restrictive or confining. They say you're going to lose your freedom. What kind of freedom lies down the road of when there's no one you can count on, no one you can depend on, no one that's going to be there for you? I'd say that's less secure, not more secure. How do we do this? How do we keep our commitments not on your own, not in your own strength? Okay, not on your own willpower, not on your religious dedication. You cannot. I've watched people try. I've watched myself try. You cannot do it on your own. Listen to this. This is the writer John. He says, we love because he first loved us. The key word is the word first. Jesus went first. Okay? He committed to you first. He made a promise to you first. And so before you step into any relationship of any kind, Jesus made a promise to you first that he would never leave, that he would never turn his face, that he would never walk away. So, whatever the case, whatever the story, whatever the high and the low, we begin and we end with the gospel that God made a promise to be with you first. His yes is stronger than your no. His grace is more powerful than your sin. Let's bow our heads as we bring this to a close.